Hello! Thank you for being here. Let me adjust my camera. Looking quite handsome today, aren't I? Thanks all for being here. It's been a long weekend. I did my radio show Saturday, did some videos today, so still one of the hardest working content creators online. The Russians still think I'm the best channel, putting stuff out every day. It was decided based on a coin flip, just like the primaries in the Democratic Party. Hello, Beach Bear. Hello, Mona Lisa. I'll rant some more about COVID if you like. We got some good stuff here tonight. So if you're just tuning in for the first time, I do live streams, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, most Wednesdays. Though I am working, that might change somewhat because I'm cooperating with some other channels and trying to set up some collaborations, particularly with people on the left, though I'm always willing to talk to anyone. So thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. So I thought, why not talk about the debate I did this weekend? So if you check out other than my roadside rambling videos today, if you check out my most recent video, it is a 4-hour debate, three hours and something minute debate. It's a panel debate, 4-on-4. And it was done on Dylan Burns TV. Let me recommend that you go to, that's a twitchtv.tv channel. First off, follow me on Twitch if you're not. That's something that I'm trying to build that base. DLive, Twitch, YouTube, I'm on all those platforms. You can see link in the description in most places, but if you just look up Normal America on most of those platforms, you'll find me. So this was on Twitch. Dylan Burns TV is the name of the channel. Dylan's a socialist, he's a left-winger, but I think he's a very fair moderator, and he's trying to do something that I think is important, which is bring people from the left and right together to discuss ideas and show that you're able to do it without threatening to kill each other and things like that. So I think it's a really important thing that could help our country out. I really do. So anyways, we had this debate. Now, let me just say, if you watched my roadside rambling on this, you might get somewhat of an idea of what I'm going to be talking about, but I think it's worth going into it in more detail. So, a lot of the problems that you'll see with that debate have to do with the format, but there's good things about the format too. So it's good to get a lot of diverse opinions. It's good to see that there are people that could be on the right and on the left that don't necessarily agree with each other. So for example, other people on the right side, on the Republican side, didn't necessarily agree with everything I said. Same with the left-wing side. So it's good in that vein, and it's good to get a bunch of diverse voices. The bad part is when you have that many people, it's very, very, very difficult to really have a very nuanced conversation. It tends to lead itself more to kind of a talking point type thing. And I'm guilty of that as much as anyone. So there were so many points on the topics we were hitting that I wanted to address that you just don't really get to kind of hammer down in. So I'm not blaming Dylan for that. I think his platform's great. We had 200-something people watching. I thought it was a good turnout. So check that out if you're interested. I wanted to talk about kind of the big points that I saw going through that. Well, first, let's address that point. For Mona Lisa on YouTube says, do you think that I could change the 4 people I was debating? Do I think that I could change their mind at this late stage in the debate? It's a great question. Not initially, right? So there's a couple things to remember. First, it's very difficult when you have 2 people that are going into something to debate or to have a disagreement. And let's assume that it's not a game. Like I did debate in college, but it was set up as a competition. But really it's 2 people that legitimately have 2 different viewpoints on something. Most of the time you're not going to get those 2 people. One will just win so much that the other will say, wow, I agree with everything you're saying. But what you can do is look for some concessions that maybe lay the groundwork for in the future saying, well, do you see how maybe I have some good points and maybe you could think favorably a little more on me or people that share my beliefs? That's kind of what you're attempting to do with that person. Or you're trying to get key concessions that you're then able to, and this is the second part, understand that your audience isn't just that person or the people you're debating. It's not even just the people that are watching at the time, particularly when you're talking about doing stuff online. There are all sorts of people that might see. So, for example, when I debated the Twitch streamer Destiny, who's a left-winger, there were 9,000 people watching. My guess is 8,950 of them were huge left-wingers that hated me, right? So it would seem like, oh, well, that's your audience. But no, because the discussion that I was having, I knew by being authentic, and I was just who I'm myself, and I had a fair conversation, that I would then be able to take that conversation and show it to other people that maybe weren't necessarily all ideologically opposed to me. So there's always a varying group of people. The way I like to look at it is there's 5 possible types of people in your audience. There are people that almost will always agree with you, they extremely agree with you, or extremely disagree with you. I would say the 4 people I was debating fell into that category. And it's very, very hard to change their minds. But then there are people, the other 3 groups, that you actually can change minds. And that's people that sort of agree with you or sort of disagree with you. Those people are open to be changed, I think. And then there are people in the middle that maybe they're undecided or they're just ignorant of the issue. Not ignorant in a bad way, but ignorant just they don't know about it. And those people might be listening. And so you have to understand, these discussions that we're having, it's not just that I'm debating, trying to convince those people. I'm going in with good faith. And by the way, if they say something that I hadn't thought of and I agree with it, so be it. Like, I'm not going in there stubborn saying I refuse to change my position. But that's one of the reasons I do this. So then you could show people. And what the most important thing you could do, if I could give anyone advice, and I'm giving people advice, I have 19 people watching me right now. So not that I'm a huge streamer, but one of the things I learned, I don't care if I only ever have 1 person watching or 0 people watching me. I just learned that I have to be authentic to myself. When I'm engaged in conversations or I'm doing videos, I can't pretend to be something I'm not. I just can't. So what you see is what you get. I might be more fired up at certain times than other times. I'm a human. Sometimes I say, you should try to be civil. Other times I'm not civil. I screw up. I'm like anyone else, don't get me wrong. But what you see is what you get. I am who I am. So if you're authentic, that shows up. And I think that even people that disagree with me, that I have a lot of left-wingers, I think that they'll say, hey, Rob's an honest person. He's authentic. I might disagree with him, but he's not playing a character or something like that. I'm doing what I'm doing, So that's my advice. Do I think that I could change their minds? Maybe on some things, but probably not. Like, if you enter a conversation and you're like, I'm a communist or I'm an anarcho-fascist, it's probably going to be a tough sell for me to say, actually, now's the greatest time to be alive in the history of the world. The United States is still the greatest country in the history of the world. We shouldn't tear down everything. It's a tough sell. Now, on that vein, one of the things I wanted to talk about is a lot of the comments I'm getting are the rudeness of some of the people that were in the debate. So let me first defend those people somewhat and then criticize them if I can. So in their defense, that's fine. I'm not thin-skinned. I don't care if someone's rude to me generally. I think it takes away from the conversation. But if that's who they really are, that's fine. And I don't think that necessarily makes them an immoral person. If they just get fired up and want to scream and call names, I'm not going to say I've never done it. So, okay, whatever. But if I can speak a little to what that kind of says. Now, I admit my bias on this show. I welcome people from any persuasion. You could be left-wing, right-wing, anywhere in between, Democrat, Republican, Socialist. I'll talk to anyone. I really will. And I appreciate everyone from those backgrounds that watch me. But I do think my bias is that I'm conservative-leaning, and I ran as a Republican, even though I'm incredibly frustrated by the Republican Party. So I'm biased, just so you know. So take it for what you will. And I don't have data on this, but I think that you're seeing more and more a particular type of person on the left that is so confident that they're right and so confident that that makes them morally superior that it leads to this kind of smugness or rudeness or verbal attacks. And I don't know if it's intentional on their part, or maybe I'm just being a snowflake and it comes off as that, but it just seems, it seems like that happens. I'm not going to say, I usually, when I get heated, I feel like I'm responding in kind, but I try to have some humility. Like, I try to live by the motto that I'm not better than anyone and they're not better than me. Now, I don't mean competency in specific areas or things like that, but just generally the idea that we have something to learn from everyone. You might say, oh, this guy down the street, he's not very smart. He only made it to 9th grade and didn't graduate, but maybe that guy's a whiz working on engines. I know people like that. They could barely read, but they could fix any machine. It's incredible intelligence, right? So you realize, look, even someone that I disagree with, I could learn from. So I try to be humble and I try to approach things with good faith. So it gets frustrating when right out of the gate, it's just like, well, you're an F and A-hole, or you're not arguing in good faith, or, obviously said with a little more flair than that. It makes it frustrating and it's hard to keep your cool. But I try. And I try to understand. I'm always trying to say, well, let me put myself in their shoes. Why would they be acting like this? And I do think that there's a lot. Yeah, thanks for posting the flag. It's awesome. I do think that there's a lot of arrogance, right? And I think it has a lot to do with we've set up our education system to discourage healthy criticism and healthy debate. And so we have people that are supremely confident that their mentality is the correct mentality. And anyone that disagrees is either an evil person or has been misled. And I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty of doing the same thing, but I try my best to understand, how could someone support Antifa? How could they? Let me try to think how this could happen. And how can I convince them that maybe that's a mistake? And so if you see the first part of that debate, it's about removing statues. And I was like, look, if you really want to remove statues, you could go through the democratic process. But I don't think you're ever justified in using sort of a mob rule to just pull down statues, no matter how offensive they are. You know, I've seen on Twitter someone's posting like a statue somewhere that they put up in a public park of Satan because it had to do with freedom of religion. It's clearly, you can see how this would be horribly offensive to Christians. I don't think that gives Christians the right to go in and just remove this statue. They could vote it out or things like that. But I don't think they have the right to just say, we're going to go yank this statue down just because we don't like it. I think that that's a crime, and I think that the police should stop that from happening. But once you adopt this mentality that says, no, not only are you wrong and I'm right, but you're either immoral or you're being duped by people that are immoral, and therefore everything I do is justified. And that's how you get the narrative of by any means necessary, which was the name of one of the Antifa associated groups, by any means necessary. And that's the motto that many people believe. It's okay. And they're able then to act with total hypocrisy. So one of the things that happened during that debate when I got upset, and this is something you'll learn from me, I will not tolerate people calling me racist. I do not care. This is something I learned in debate. So when I debated 2003 to about 2007, there were a lot of feminist teams, critical race theory teams, and things like that. And their power was their oratory skills. It wasn't necessarily the specific argumentation, but they spoke very passionately. And particularly in debate, which is the left of the left, that played very well. And so you would see these teams do very well, and all of their thunder and their ability came from screaming at you that you were a racist or that you were endorsing a racist system. So if you take that thunder away, they really didn't have anything. And so in debate, one of the things that happens is you have prep time, which is throughout a debate, one person, so it's teams of two versus each other. Each person speaks 9 minutes, so affirmative, then negative, then affirmative, then negative. And then each person speaks 6 minutes, negative, affirmative, negative, affirmative. So you give 2 speeches and your partner gives 2 speeches. And you get prep time in between the speeches where you could 10 minutes total for the whole round. So maybe I'll take 2 minutes to get ready for one of my speeches. Then my partner takes 2 minutes, etc. I used to take prep time when people would call me racist, and I do something I never saw anyone else do in debate, which I'd ask the judge, can I take some prep time? And they'd say, sure. And I would say, hey, I just want to let you all know, I'm not going to let you call me a racist. I'll walk out of the room. If you want to have a serious discussion about race, so be it. I'm not a racist. I have no interest in listening to you call me a racist. You're not interested in a serious conversation if that's what you're doing, so it's up to you. And then almost every time they would say, well, no, we'll have the conversation. And then they didn't have this anger towards me. It would come off as disingenuous. Like, what are you angry at? Like, you know, I put the ball in your court. If you want to have a serious discussion, we will. I'm not going to leave you yell and scream at me. And I think more of us need to do that. You know what's in your heart. If you're not a racist, you're not a racist. Yet, in that debate, I had someone who later apologized and said that they realized that they had made a mistake, that perhaps I wasn't doing this, but they accused me and another person on the panel of dog whistling to racist, to white supremacist. I was not dog whistling to a white supremacist at all. In fact, what she thought I said was the great replacement, which apparently is a term I could gather intuitively what that would mean. Like, that would, if a white supremacist is saying that, I guess that means they're worried about white people being replaced. I even said before that I care not about my ethnicity. I don't care. If white people would decide to voluntarily stop breeding, I wouldn't care. Now, if anyone tried to force them, or, you know, that's completely different. But I really don't care. I'm more concerned that in the future there are people that think like me than people that look like me. So I don't know how I even remotely come off as white supremacist. I would think every white supremacist would be infuriated with me making that suggestion. And I've had people get mad at me. Yeah, I do think some of it. Hey, what's up, Tony Patriot? I do think some of it's I seem like I'm misrepresenting the panel. Please, there were if I so Danabo on Periscope, I feel that there were at least two people that were saying that I was racially dog whistling. And I can tell you we had a more constructive conversation about it after the camera went off, where there were three people of the panel that were agreeing that I possibly racially dog whistled. And I also was sent a video from another streamer's channel that did a post-debate wrap-up, where one of them thought I maybe was disingenuous and I'm actually a white supremacist. But then several of the others said, no, we just think that Rob doesn't, he's probably has good intentions and doesn't realize that he's dog whistling to racism. So I don't think that I'm misrepresenting the panel. And no, the person that was replaced, it was actually the person came in, her name was Mel, that was the one that accused, and she finished the debate that accused me of dog whistling. So, again, I don't think that was, it wasn't like she said that and everyone else on the panel was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. They all seemed to agree with that, right? So hopefully that clears it up. And anyways, to move further with the point, so I was kind of mad, and I let it be known. And, you know, also there was a discussion about did I border on malicious for my interpretation of an article? I didn't think I did. I thought it was nonsense. But, you know, anyways, needless to say, the people apologized to me at the end of the debate, and then after the debate we had a discussion. And I'm putting good faith motivation to them. I will. They seem to think that I just didn't understand what dog whistling was. And that if they kind of explained to me what it was, then I would understand their position better. And I get it, and I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I do understand what dog whistling is. I do. And I just think I handle it in a different way. When I'm trying to engage in a discussion with someone, I'm basically taking their words, I'm assuming good faith with them, and I'm taking their words. Now, if they say something that's blatantly racist, so for example, let's say we're discussing the reason that possibly there's more violent crime, the reason that there's more police shootings of black people per capita than whites. So blacks are 2.5 more times likely to be shot by police than whites. So if we're discussing that and I cite statistics and say, well, actually, I think one of the big reasons for that is when the cops go into certain communities, not all communities, but certain communities that are predominantly black, there's an incredible amount of violence there, which means that there's a more likelihood that police will engage in both legitimate and illegitimate violence in those communities, right? If I say that, but I'm not saying, oh, and by the way, I hate all black people and blah, 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 blah. I'm not being a racist, and I'm not dog whistling to racism. I'm literally addressing the point that was brought up and explaining that we need to look into the reasons for this, right? That's not a dog whistle to racism. And the argument, well, yes, but you have to understand, people that are white supremacists cite that. They cite the violent black criminal statistics. Okay, but that's not me. Why should I be held accountable for them? And if it's, well, you should be aware. We're just saying, like, I don't know. Am I supposed to put a disclaimer up? Like, oh, disclaimer, by the way, I'm not a white supremacist, blah, blah, blah. Well, I refuse to do that. And here's why. Sometimes I do, but I'm not going to give extremists on either side the power over our conversation so much that we're afraid to talk about real data because we're afraid that they'll co-opt that to be racist. I'm not going to do that. If anything, that's giving more power to the white supremacist. Oh, I'll talk about this data, but you have to understand white supremacists say that. Danabo says, well, fair enough. Danabo says, you're not sure what? That I'm a white supremacist or I'm dog whistling to white supremacists? Oh, Dylan, you're on here. No, not at all. Dylan, it's quite the opposite. I thought the discussion at the end was good. And I actually hope to maybe discuss this with Mel in the future on your show. I would love to. So yeah, Dylan's on Twitch right now who hosted fantastic. And I mean this in all sincerity. I've seen a lot of people host kind of debate shows like this, and I think Dylan is the best moderator I've seen. And it's really a difficult thing because you have to understand there's so many passionate people on all sides. So no doubt Dylan has his own opinions on things, but you could barely tell what his opinions would be because he's such a down-the-middle moderator. So Danabo says on Periscope that the original opinion of me was that I was full-blown alt-right. I may have swayed that in the panel. I'm not saying this is a cop-out, but I think that sometimes these definitions get thrown about. So, like, alt-right, what it means to me is kind of like a racialized right-winger. I'm not that at all. Not at all. everyone's welcome to their opinions, certainly, but all I can say is you can check out thousands upon thousands of hours of material that I've done on this channel. I used to, every Martin Luther King Day, I would talk about, and I still truly believe this. This is very good. I think that some of the best Americans that are far better than I'll ever be are black Americans that came out of these inner cities, that both parties have let down, that are hellholes, that did the right thing, even though there was peer pressure in their own community against them to do things like get an education. And even though the schools were probably terrible that they were forced to go to, yet somehow they go there, avoid all of the pitfalls that are so common in these inner city places, and go on to be some of the smartest, most intelligent people, providing great patriotism, not just patriotism, but services that benefit the rest of this country. Those people are unbelievable. Or how about this? Another group of people. It's one of the stories with the Aunt Jemima thing that upsets me, because I've said for years, imagine this. Imagine going through the institution of slavery, right? And you're finally freed after the hell that you went through for generations. Do you know that there were unbelievable amounts of black Americans that they didn't say, now I want my revenge? You know what they said? You give me the opportunity to follow the same rules you do, and I'll show through my work ethic. That's how I'll get back. I'm going to become a success. I'll show all the people that said I was inferior. You show me, you just give me an equal chance, and I'll prove you wrong. And people like Aunt Jemima literally did that. She became a millionaire because she was such an entrepreneur and such a successful cook. Like, to me, those stories of those Americans are unbelievable. So I'm not saying, oh, that proves I'm not all right, but I'm just not based on what I think the definition is. Now, I think that the idea of white privilege and stuff is nonsense. Not that it doesn't exist, but that there's privilege of all races, of all genders, of things like that. But that doesn't make me a racist or somehow alt-right. That's me questioning things. I think that largely Black Lives Matter as an organization and the demands they want are terrible for America and for the black community. But that doesn't make me immoral. You might just say, well, I disagree with you, Rob, which is fine. That's what debate should be. But that doesn't make me a racist, and I'm not a racist at all. At all. And anyone who knows me knows that. And I have plenty of friends who are extremely left-wing. You have to understand, when I was in the debate community, all of my friends that I made through that think that I'm like this novelty act because it's like, oh, Rob's the one conservative that's all right. Now, they've started to think I'm crazy because I supported Trump, but I think most of them just think that I'm an idiot and not that I was secretly a racist or something like that. So, anyways, I'll explain that because it seemed like you asked in good faith. I'll explain that. But I do want to let you know, okay, we'll get to that in a second, Dan, but I do want to let you know that I do not, normally, if someone in a hostile manner calls me a racist, I will not accept it. I will not. I will not give people the power to silence me by making accusations about me that aren't true. And we allow that to occur way too often in this society, where people are now afraid to speak up and afraid to talk about obvious truths. And when you're afraid to talk about the truth, what happens is things get worse and worse. And then we can't even if your agenda is merely to focus on the black culture or to focus on black communities or black interactions with the police and violence from police towards blacks, even if that's your primary concern, which is fine. I try to take more of a focus of what I know better or the country as a whole. So I don't begrudge someone if that's their community. Absolutely. You focus on, if you're black and you want to focus on that, no problem. But one of the things that I think is you have to understand if you're in those communities. My argument to you isn't that I don't care about your community. My argument is if we don't correctly isolate what the problems are, then we'll never get to a good solution. And I talk about this all the time. I think that the main problem is that the establishment in this country has screwed over working class people of all races, of all genders, etc. for the past 60 years. And they throw us this division so that we're so busy fighting with each other that we ignore they're laughing all the way to the bank. So that's my criticism. So Danabo says, and this is what I was getting to, so I'm glad you brought it up. Danabo on Periscope says, do I understand that the alt-right has co-opted conservative language? What does that mean? And this was kind of what was being explained to me after the panel. Okay, so let's look at it this way. Do I understand that sometimes the things I could be saying could be taken by a racist? Or even worse than a racist. Don't get me wrong, racists are really disgusting. I'm not downplaying racism. But worse than a racist is someone who is willing to enact violence on people based on their extreme ideological beliefs. So, for example, it could be a racist that would, like, for example, you remember, I'm from Pennsylvania, so there was this, in Pittsburgh, a synagogue got shot up terribly. Right? So someone could say, Rob, what you're saying right now, I've also heard people like that synagogue shooter say that. That's disgusting, right? But do we give that synagogue shooter the power to say then, well, any position that that shooter ended up having now is taboo. Now we can't talk about that position. I think that's a huge mistake. I think that's giving even more power to that disgusting racist that shot up those people. And I think that as long as we do that, then we've actively encouraged people to take the most extreme position. Because that's the only way, then they're able to control the conversation in that way. Well, maybe it paints, well, and that's what I'm going to get to. So it might paint people in a brush, but again, what did I say? Is me citing that black people commit 50% of homicides in this country? Is that something that's so taboo? If it's a data point that it's true, which it is, and if it seems relevant to the conversation, I don't see why that would paint me in the same brush as a white supremacist. That's not right. If that's the amount of discourse we do, then all political discussion will be is just looking for someone horrible that said what the person you're discussing is saying, right? So I could say, for example, oh, you know who else made these very same criticisms of the police? Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. They're black nationalists. They likened Jews to termites. Louis Farrakhan likened Jews to termites 2 weeks before the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter. So does that mean any criticism of the police is all of a sudden it's a dog whistle? No, not at all. There are fair criticisms of policing. So instead of judging other people based on, well, what kind of psychopath could say a similar thing and then go on, we should judge people about, well, no, I disagree that it's a common dog whistle. If that's the definition of dog whistle, so Danabo in Periscope says, yes, if I say that blacks commit 50% of homicides, that's a common dog whistle to the alt-right. Okay, well then a common dog whistle to the, whatever we want to call it, I don't think alt-left, but let's say black nationalists. A common dog whistle to black nationalists is citing that cops or blacks are 2.5 times more likely to be shot by police than whites. So does that mean we have to really hammer down on anyone on the left that talks about this? Or here's another example. When the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand, he left a manifesto. Now this guy was obviously, he was like the Joker. He admits, like for example, I don't know how much people know about video games, but he said one of his inspirations for the shooting was Spyro the Dragon. He admitted up front that he just wanted to get the left and the right to fight each other and blame each other. And so he put things in the manifesto that both sides would be able to say, see, he was a right-winger, see, he was a left-winger. And so everyone called him a right-winger. Many people did. Because he shot up an Islamic church and they said, this is like the radical white supremacist, right? But do you know what else did he put in that manifesto? And then there was a shooter that cited him as an inspiration at a Walmart, I believe, in Texas. You know what both of them put in their reasoning? Both of them. They were worried about climate change and that they wanted to cause division, to cause humans to kill each other, basically, because they're worried that humans are destroying the environment. Now, can I credibly say anyone who talks about climate change then's dog whistling to the Christchurch shooting? Is that going to be, technically it's dog whistle, that's what this person said. We have at least 2 people that have killed people in the name of that. And certainly we've seen environmental terrorism in the past, and it still currently exists. But clearly there are people, even if I would disagree with them on some things, that have legitimate reasons to be concerned about damage to our environment. So I'm never going to besmirch them or try to silence them by saying, well, you could potentially be dog whistling to an extremist. What's the utility of saying that? What does that do? It only gives the extreme amongst us the most power. Now, not only do they have the power to control us through fear and through violence, but they actually can control us through what we're allowed to talk about now. And that's absolute nonsense. So think about this. What's the lesson we're saying then? So we have to be sure if we talk about 50% of homicides occurring in the black community, that's a dog whistle to racist. Okay, so then we won't talk about it. Is that the solution? Well, you do understand that it's not just that black people are 50% of homicide perpetrators, they're also 50% of homicide victims. So what, we just can't deal with that problem? Sorry, We can't do anything. The country's let down these communities. Now we can't do anything to solve it because to even address the problem is a dog whistle. That's what... So imagine that you're a black mother who you're raising 2 children by yourself in inner city Chicago, and you're working 2 jobs. You're working like 95 hours a week, and you didn't have an opportunity to get a great education in the community you were brought up in. And maybe you were born into a single parent household as well. But you're really trying your best. You're really doing everything. You spend as much time with your kids as possible. You're teaching them that a great education is important. You're working 2 jobs. You're doing everything right. And then your kid gets killed in a drive-by shooting. Sorry, we can't discuss that because that would be a dog whistle to white supremacy. I refuse to accept that. Absolutely refuse it in the strongest possible terms. And if you say that, if you're, and this is the point I was trying to get across is, look, then here's the problem. You might think it's okay for me to do that if I'm criticizing someone saying that. But Danabo says it's important not to start the conversation like that, depending on my motivation. But no, I'm not going to leave people dictate the terms in which I may start a conversation. Absolutely not. And when you're talking about in the process of a debate where you have limited time to speak anyways, you don't always have time to be like, here is the full 2-hour context of what this is. And so I refuse to not bring up the point because, well, I mean, again, do you understand that a lot of people that watch my channel are right-wings? So we can turn a debate on right now. We can turn that debate I did the other night. And I guarantee a lot of people on here, if we sought to do so, could say, look at that. They're dog whistling to the extreme left that are writing things like kill whitey. That's what they're doing. They're talking about white privilege. There it is. They're right. That's a dog whistle to the racists that hate white people. What's the fruitfulness of that? What's that going to lead to that's beneficial? Joe says perhaps the Christchurch shooter had a grievance. Of course. It doesn't mean his grievances were accurate. Danabo says that's fine too, but expect the same results until there's someone sensible there. Yeah, there was someone sensible there, me. And there could be sensible people that are willing to listen to it. Again, I think that this... I could say, Danabo, the fact that you're saying this right now, that we have to be careful and you have to start conversations in a certain way. Only if it's certain things that you don't like, right? I think that you're dog whistling right now, Danabo. I don't think you're being very sensible. By bringing up dog whistling, talking about homicide victims, I think that's a dog whistle to say that you want those homicides to continue to occur. People say that. There are a lot of white supremacists that don't want us talking about homicide because they would like those homicides to continue because they hate black people so much. So be very careful, Danabo. I think you're dog whistling right now. Now, clearly, I don't believe that, but I'm just bringing up the point. Is that what we're going to lead to? Right, I know I don't have to be careful, and I won't. And that's one of the problems I see in this country today. That we have people that are afraid to speak the truth. Everyone's walking on eggshells because some people say, oh, you can't address a conversation, you can't say this, you can't say that, because you could offend someone who thinks that it's potentially a racist dog whistle, therefore you can't say that. I reject that in the strongest possible terms. Absolutely reject it. I'm not going to leave someone dictate the terms on which I'm allowed to discuss something. If I say something that's blatantly racist, then someone could call me out for it. Until then, it is absurd to say, well, we don't think you're a racist, but we think a racist could say part of what you said, therefore you should be careful about saying part of what you said. That is the dumbest way that I could think of to go about having an honest conversation with someone. Absolutely. And my warning to the people on the left is if that's the game you play, eventually, not me, but other people on the right will start playing that same game. And then we're literally, the reason that I like Dylan's show and like doing that debate was because I think the idea of talking to people on the other side of the aisle is so important. And so every step we take to make that conversation less likely to happen is a step in the wrong direction, in my opinion. And so one of the big steps in the wrong direction is saying we judge people by what other people... So, like, here's one of the dumb things that we could see, right? Remember Trump, Trump's running for office and people said, David Duke's voting for Trump. Oh, David Duke's going to vote for Trump. What does that prove? Okay, so, as if I can't find psychopaths that are voting for Hillary Clinton? Or racists that are voting for Hillary Clinton? David Duke also supported Ilhan Omar, as did many white supremacists. Many white supremacists are actually directly supporting a lot of the messages of Black Lives Matter. If, for example, if you go to the Chaz in Seattle, right, the autonomous zone, one of their demands was basically segregated hospitals. Yes, white supremacists agree. Keep black people with black doctors in black hospitals. White people in white hospitals. That's nonsense. We've already decided that segregation is the wrong way to go. But that's what happens when we have to, well, you can't speak up. You can't be against black. The mere fact that I would criticize that position from an official Black Lives Matter group would then be said, so you don't care about Black Lives Matter? Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. I reject the idea. And Scott Adams said this, and this is exactly what I'm going to start saying. If someone asks me if I think Black Lives Matter, my answer is, of course, and how dare you imply they don't? Well, let me see what you said, Danbo. Missed you. Do I think it's possible to have a sensible conversation with someone on the extreme left? Define sensible. Is it a worthwhile conversation? Yes. I think that there could be worthwhile conversations. For two reasons. One, because it's not just that extreme person on the left that will hear the conversation, and so other people could hear it. But second, how else can we stop extremism if we refuse to talk to them? Now, am I going to platform someone necessarily that's advocating extremely bigoted, racist remarks? Advocating extreme violence against people for a bigoted reason? No, I wouldn't platform them. But would I have a conversation with them? Yes. And it might shock you to know I've had conversations with extreme people on the left quite frequently. Like actual Antifa, I believe that we should tear down statues. I believe we should burn police precincts. I have those conversations quite frequently. I would consider that an extreme left position. Is there any situation in which I would change my language? Well, yes, there's situations where I'd change my language all the time. For example, if I'm in church, if I'm discussing things with people that I know, I change my language somewhat for this channel. I'm not a big cursor, but I certainly swear less on this channel than I would in real life. So yeah, there are situations where I'd change my channel or change my language. Would I change my language in terms of to not appear as if I'm racially dog whistling? No, I can't see that happening. If I want to talk about a data point, I'll talk about it. It will never factor into my consideration. Well, possibly this means I'm racially dog whistling. But I will say that something that I'm trying to stop, but along this vein, is I do find myself quite often changing my language, and I think all of society does, in ways that make me uncomfortable. So let me give you an example. Why is it that we have to say when businesses are being burned down in some of these riots, well, they are minority-owned businesses. There were minority-owned businesses that were burned down. Well, why do we need that adjective, minority-owned? Isn't it enough to just say there were businesses that were burned down? Well, no, because implicitly we know that there were a group of people that really only want to focus on the minority aspect. And so we bring that up knowing, well, this might be more appealing to an audience that would normally disagree with me. So if I just say businesses are being burnt down, they might say, who cares? Capitalism's bad. Money's less important than lives. But if I say minority-owned businesses are being burnt down, they might say, oh, yeah. So yeah, I guess in that sense, but I'm going to try to stop doing that as much. But yeah, certainly there's a political gamesmanship. It's one of the things I criticize Trump for all the time. So for example, I was in a discussion last night. Do I think there are language changes that could be made in the left? I guess. But I would rather people be honest than be concerned about my feelings or what I might think about what they say. So for example, if someone says white privilege, that could literally lead to a discussion where they start talking about white people have original sin and white people are less moral than other people. And that's an attitude that I find very problematic and dangerous. But they could be saying white privilege. No, I'm not saying white people are worse or anything like that. I'm just saying they have some sort of privilege. Now, I might disagree with a lot of that sentiment, but I don't think that it's fair for me to say, oh, so you're racist against white people as a result of that. And I'm not going to ask them to change the way they speak to accommodate me. Not at all. So, people are saying white privilege is 100% racist. No, there are people that could say it, and I don't think they're doing it in a racist context. They legitimately believe that there is white privilege. And that's not them saying, therefore I dislike white people. It's just them saying, I disagree largely. Or rather, I agree, but it doesn't matter because there's privilege of all races. So yes, there's white privilege and black privilege and Hispanic privilege and Asian privilege. And all of that privilege is very minute to privileges that go way beyond, such as the privilege of wealth. That's a big one. Or the privilege of being healthy. Or the privilege of being born in this time, the best time in the history of the world to be alive. Or the privilege to be born in the United States. All of that's way greater than any privilege from any skin color. Or the privilege to be born in a two-parent household. Or the privilege to have not been abused as a child. Or the privilege to not have any crippling, debilitative disease. All of those privileges way more important than any race privilege, any gender privilege. Yeah, we don't focus on that stuff because it's not really productive to be like, oh, if you're, I've talked about this before. Let's assume you're 18 years old and you grew up with an abusive father and now you have a choice to make. You're 18 and your choice could be every time you fail in life, you say, it's because my father was abusive, I hate him. Or you could say, okay, I had a bad upbringing. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I'm going to bust my hump and I'm going to achieve in life. Which person ends up better? Now, does that mean we shouldn't strive to end abusive fathers? No, of course not. But what's the point? Right, Clive, I agree. To have two-parent household, that's one of the most important. I mean, again, let me just go through it. So, like, if you're alive today, you've hit the genetic lottery. You've hit it. You're already, if you meet these several criteria, you are 99% most privileged person. You're in the top 1% of privilege in the history of the world for humans. All right, here's the criteria. You're born now. You weren't born with any crippling, debilitative disease, right? Because that's important. It doesn't matter when you were born. If you're born with a terrible, painful disease, you got a bad lot, no matter when. But even then, your chances are much better now than they would have been even 50 years ago, with our medical science and things like that. So if you're born now, if you didn't have any real diseases, and if you're born in a Western country, like the United States, particularly the United States, that makes you top 1% of people privileged in the history of the world. Even if you're poor, even if you're in poverty, still makes you. So let's assume for a minute, let's take the white privilege argument and say, okay, maybe it is more privileged overall to be white. We'll concede that for a minute. So what we're talking about is white people are, if you're born today and you had a two-parent household and you're born in the United States and you have access to the internet to argue with people online and you don't have a crippling disease and you're white, then you're 99.997 of the most privileged people ever to live. Now, if you have all those things and you're black, then you're 99.996 of the most privileged people ever to live. Is that really what we're going to tear the institutions down, that 0.0001%? So, I mean, I don't know. And this often happened, right? When I was in debate, this would come up a lot because, especially in debate, even as left-wing as debate was, you can't really say that you were born evil because that's the definition of racism. So let me give you an example. If I say you were born Hispanic, therefore you're evil, you were born white, therefore that's racism. It is. You're judging someone with a horrible insult or a horrible charge based solely on their race. And so you would say, well, what does it mean to be white? And they would say, well, you have to choose to be white. Okay, how did I choose to be white? Well, blah, blah, and there wasn't a lot that they could say, but basically came down to money and power. And then I would talk about my life, and I'd say, okay, I have a sister that's 20 years younger than me, and right now my parents literally don't have a working furnace, so I gave the last of my money to help them. I work at Burger King 40 hours a week. I go to the cheapest state school in Pennsylvania. I drive a car that I paid $80 for my friend who was on his way to the junkyard. I haven't had electricity for 2 months. I'm paying my own way through school, working 40 hours a week, going to the cheapest possible school, driving a pile of junk, trying to give extra money to my parents because I have a sister that's 20 years younger that doesn't have a working furnace right now. Now, you happen to have the skin color of a person of color, black or brown, right? Now, if being white is about money and power and like that sort of privilege, do you have a car? Oh, you drive a Jaguar. Where do you go to school? Oh, you go to the University of Louisville. Did you have a scholarship? Oh, you have a full scholarship. Do you work? Oh, no. You don't work while you're going to school because you have a scholarship. So what is it again about what's my privilege here? What makes me identify as white? right? And then I would say, and by the way, none of that should factor into the judge's decision. I don't want people fighting, oh, you win because you're more oppressed. No! My whole point is, let's just not get into that game. It's stupid. I don't care. We're both here. We're equal competitors right now. Let's have the debate. Let's do the game. That's what it is. It's a game at the end of the day. It's a competition. I don't want special points because of who I am. Who I am should not even factor into the debate. We're just discussing hypothetical ideas. Now, the debate I did here, it's not just a game. It's actually being authentic and advocating our positions. So that's a little different. But once we start to bring in who we are as people, and then it's a short line to the next thing, right? Which is, well, if you're not a person of a certain color, then you can't speak on an issue. You don't understand what it's like to be black. You don't understand what it's like to be a woman. You don't understand what it's like to be transgender. You don't understand, right? You'll never be able to understand. Well, the problem is, then that leads to statements like the governor of Pennsylvania made 2 weeks ago. My friend Todd Bartley, who does the radio show with me, which, tune in, I do a radio show Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern. You can watch it right here on the whatever channel you're watching right now. Twitch, DLive. You can watch it there, and we're also happen to be on the radio in Williamsport at the same time. But Todd Bartley's a great journalist out of Williamsport, and he asked Governor Wolf, look, given all the racial tensions that are occurring in the country right now and discussions of policing, what's your message to Pennsylvania, a unifying message to kind of bring us together? And Tom Wolf's message of unification was, he said, there are two Pennsylvanias, one for white people and one for black people. Now, does that sound like a unifying message? And let me tell you, and so Douglas, am I getting this right? Yeah, Douglas Murray, British man, fantastic. He's worth watching. I think he's a great, he wrote a book called The Strange Death of Europe. He talks about this. He says, look, here's the problem. Once you say that you can't understand someone if you're not their skin color, what you've basically done is make dialogue meaningless, because that will always be the deciding factor. You could say, well, actually, statistics show this, and they'll say, but you don't know what it's like to be me. You don't know what it's like to be me. Therefore, your argument doesn't apply, or your statement doesn't apply. But everyone could say that, right? I could say that. You don't know what it's like to be me. Everyone could say that. And what that does is it makes conversation and dialogue impossible. And when you make dialogue impossible, you make violence inevitable. Because when we can't talk to each other, something will fill that gap and it will be violence. And that's why I reject that attitude. I reject it. And you see it all the time. Well, men shouldn't be able to talk about abortion. White people don't understand what's going on in the black community. Those are very troubling statements because, and let me just go further with this. So a friend of mine, Prime K's, who I hope Prime doesn't mind me mentioning him on this channel. Prime's left-leaning. I first met him on Dylan's show. He's got an up-and-coming channel on Twitch, which I recommend checking out. It's capital P, so it's Prime, and then one word, capital K, C-A-Y-E-S. And I'm going to try to be working together with him to maybe once a month or once a week do a tandem show that'll stream on both of our channels, where we have debate topics where it's maybe us two and two other people, one on the left and one on the right, and we discuss certain issues, right? So really, really nice guy. And even though we disagree, I think we both respect that we're arguing in good faith, and it's good to hear people with different opinions. It helps strengthen your own opinions, and maybe you're wrong about something. And in that case, it can help give you a better worldview. So I really appreciate him. I was on his channel the other night just because I was bored, so I didn't stream this or record it for my channel, but I don't mind. I just pop on his channel, and he does what I'm going to try to do, which is I'm going to have a night once I get my new computer. By the way, donate to Rob Noor so he can get a new computer. Right now, just for those of you who don't know, it's impossible for me to do a Discord chat with like several people that call in and stream at the same time because my computer's not built for it. It just can't do it. So I spent $1,200 on a new laptop, and hopefully I get better luck with it. So please donate me money. Donate me money. Donate money to me. Donate me money. What does that mean? I would happily take the monies to go through that. But no, I'd really appreciate it. So anyways, I was on his channel, and we were having a discussion. There was a group of us having a discussion. It was very polite, and the discussion started to come down to something like this. We were talking about immigration and things like that. Different communities coming in and not assimilating, things like that. And I made this point, which I think is something that we need to deal with. This is, and I'm not the first person to say this, but what makes a country a country? Right? There was a time in history, if you go back in history, it was obvious what made a country a country. Everyone was the same ethnic group. Spain was the Spanish. Italy was the Italians, right? England was the English. Everybody in a country basically looked the same with maybe very slight expectation or exceptions. The United States was different. The United States was a bunch of people of different ethnicities coming to one country. So there had to be something that brings them together. If it's not religion, if it's not ethnicity, there still has to be some sort of cohesion. What is it? What does it mean to be American? And you hear this in the UK, you hear this all the time. What does it mean to be British? It's not skin color. I reject anyone that's like, well, being American means being white. Ridiculous. But okay, we could agree it's not that. Then what is it? Is it being Christian? No, I don't think so. I think that certainly a lot of the values that being an American means started from the Christian faith, but I think that you don't have to, or I won't even say started. The founding fathers had those values because they themselves had Christian faith, would be a better, but I don't think you necessarily need to be a Christian to be American. So it's a difficult question to answer, but my answer to it is, I believe it's the ideas. If you watch the 7-minute video at the top of my YouTube channel, America is the greatest country in the history of the world because it was the first country to codify the importance of the individual, the concepts of personal liberty and personal responsibility. So I think that's what it means to be an American. And it also means the Bill of Rights and believing that all people are created equal and believing that basically we could all live our own lives without the boot of the government on us. But we still need a government to keep us collected. So not just anarchy. That to me, now it's not the best definition, but that's my idea of what it means to be an American. And you could be Hispanic or black or Asian or white. You could be first generation. You could be 10th generation. You could be Christian. You could be atheist. All of that, you could still fit into that. You're still an American. Doesn't mean you can't criticize policies that have happened in the United States. Not saying at all. Now, has the United States always lived up to those goals? No. Part of being an American is believing all people are created equal. Was that the case when the country founded? I think that was part of the goal, but they certainly failed. We see with, racist policies to Chinese. We see with slavery. We see with Jim Crow laws, Korematsu decision where we interned Japanese in internment camps in World War II, and the list goes on and on. So it's like, are there Christian values? Yes. Does anyone fully live up to the Christian values? No. So again, America will never perfectly meet the values we've set forth, but that's the idea of what it means to be an American. At least to me. I'm open to floor. I said, does anyone else, does anyone disagree? And no one had a better definition, but I don't care about that. But more importantly, no one disagreed that we need to have something to bring us together as a country. There has to be something. And we all agree that race isn't it and religion's not it. So what is it? What brings us together as a country? And there was a gentleman there, and he said, well, I disagree with your definition of part of being an American means believing all people are created equal. Because clearly that's not the case because of slavery. And I said, like I said to you, I said, yes, but that does not, it's still, to be an American now means you believe that concept. Does that mean that America always lived up to that concept? No, but that's still something that unifies us. When we see people from all over the world of different ethnicities coming here, they're coming here because they believe in the American ideal of, if I come here and bust my butt, I can achieve. It doesn't matter what my ethnicity is, where I came from, etc. That's why they're coming here, because they believe that ideal. And that's what makes it American. And this person was like, no, as a black man, I can't believe that. I refuse to accept that. And I said, well, then what do you think it means to be an American? And he says, I don't know, that nothing. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you think we could continue to coexist? And he said, no. Do you realize how frightening that is? Because then, you know who agrees with that? Richard Spencer, the alt-right, the racists, they agree with that. They're like, yes, you're right. Absolutely, that's our argument. White and black people can't live together. Absolutely true. And they're very, like, I hesitate to say intelligent, but if you listen to some of them, they're not saying, now I understand what they're saying might be different than what they're feeling, but what they say is, oh, no, we're not saying, kill black people. We're saying give them their own area. Give them the South. Give them these 4 states. Leave all the black people live there, and they're not allowed in our area. And this area will be for white people. We don't want other people there. But it's not that we hate them. It's not that we want them to die. Hey, they'll have their own community. If they do great, good for them. We just want our own community. Now, I reject that argument as strong as possible, right? But that's exactly the argument that people are making that are saying, that are black nationalists, like the Nation of Islam. That's exactly what they're saying. We don't want a country that white people were in. We want our own country. The greatest ally to the extreme right is the extreme left. White nationalists love black nationalists. Because they both fundamentally agree with the same thing. Yes, separate. Segregate us. We don't want to be in the same areas together. The rest of us should refuse to accept that. But once we start saying, well, it's impossible to understand someone that's of a different skin color than you, you're like, you want to talk about dog whistling? I'm not saying and I'll explain this nuanced difference. I'm not saying that's a dog whistle, so I shouldn't have even said that. But that literally does lead to the argument. Then can we live together? If we can't understand each other, can we live together? So I just refuse to reject that premise. Apple Fritter. So Apple Fritter, just to ask on D Live, you are suggesting that whites and blacks can't coexist. You're saying I'm irrational, and why would I disbelieve that there should be why I tried to live together? Yeah. Yeah, I reject that wholeheartedly. Absolutely, I do. In fact, America is still a success story of multi-ethnic groups coming together. It still is, even the problems we're seeing today. And I think it was better 10 years ago when we weren't focused as much on these problems. Like, for example, do you really believe, I'm one who believes that our establishment has been there for so long that they become corrupted. So let's say then that I then end up, through no fault of my own, all of a sudden, all the leaders of different groups say, we're all going to have our own countries. We'll have just this white country here. It'll be in the Northeast. And then in the Southeast will be blacks. And in the Northwest will be Hispanics and Asians, or whatever, however they break it up. Do I really believe then, oh, that solved everything? Now all of a sudden my leaders are going to care. No, of course not. So, no. Right, Apple Fritter. Yes, America today is a success story. What country would you recommend elsewise? No, segregation is a failure. Forced diversity, also a failure. But willing diversity can work. Okay. What else we on it? So, yeah, 34 people listening right now. Thank you so much. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Please also consider donating money. Apple Fritter, I am sorry that you disagree with me, but I think the idea of a country for black people and a country for white people is not only a really disgusting idea, but a terrible idea. All right, yeah, take it easy. I reject that sort of racial nationalism in the strongest possible terms. Australia's gooder, says Rational Wrong Thing. At least have a better vocabulary. You did have Mick Dundee. By the way, I'm a proud owner of a Subaru now. Which I still remember in my childhood, like 1996 to 99. Mick Dundee selling me Subarus on TV. Yes, if there are countries in Africa that refuse to accept people of a different race, that is a disgusting idea. Yep, agreed. Singing Dixieland. I mean, look, one of the greatest rock songs in history, I think, is The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Written and sang, well, I don't know if Levon Helm. Levon Helm was American, but the rest of the people in the band were Canadian. And it's a beautiful song. And it's just talking about the average person in the South that fought in the Civil War. and what they sacrifice. But so, all right. Well, Subarus here, I don't know how common they are. I don't pay attention to cars much, but I was just pleased to be driving the same car that Crocodile Dundee was driving, so. There was another brief conversation that I wanted to have just about that debate that I think is worth having. And it's this idea. I think that there's... Never mind, I'll save that for another day. But this part I do want to talk about. I think that sometimes in the effort of appearing anti-racist, that people end up saying things that could be interpreted as racist. Or, yeah, that's probably the best way I want to put that. And so, all of a sudden, we end up making what I think are kind of almost unintentionally bigoted claims, right? So let me give you an example. We were having a discussion about illegal immigration and the idea of the need for assimilation, which I do believe there needs to be an assimilation. Again, we can't just be a country of this is where people of this ethnicity live and they speak their own language, and then people of their ethnicity live here and they speak. We kind of, if you come to the country, we all kind of got to work together in some sort of thing, right? And so we were talking about the idea of racial enclaves. And a lot of the people on the left made an argument, which is true, that a lot of the beginnings of these racial enclaves had to do with kind of racist laws. So, for example, the gold rush in California, you had tons of people that were coming over for Asia. And there were literally laws passed in California that said it was illegal to hire people of Asian descent. That's textbook definition of a racist law. And so what happened was you had all these people come over from China, and they were met by people in the Chinese community, and they would set up laundromats or restaurants and things like that. And they were a very cohesive community, but they all stuck together. And that's why they became an enclave. They were forced into that because they needed, you know, it's not like today where it's like, oh, you go to a country you don't like it, hop on a plane and go back. If you took the chance to come to America and all of a sudden you found out you can't get work, you need a support system. And so you go to the people that share your ethnicity. And so, yes, certainly that was the beginnings of those types of Asian enclaves. Absolutely. Like, of course. And the same would be true of the black community with things like slavery. Of course. Right? But I don't think we see that today. Right? Certainly the laws aren't set up that way. Now, you could say there's societal pressure or implicit bias and things like that. We could have that discussion. But here was my point. Yes, we could say that there were external factors that forced enclaves. But let's also remember, a lot of people, even in these communities, so let's just take for the sake of argument, Hispanic community. Or the Cuban community, Cuban Americans. If you go to Florida, there are a lot of Cuban communities that many times aren't even publicly speaking English. And they kind of all came into a community. And they like it that way. And I was just making the point, yes, I will concede that there were certainly outside pressures that forced enclaves, but there's also some truth to the fact that a lot of it is also that they want to be in an enclave. They want to be around people that share their culture and share their ethnicity, and probably their religious practices, etc. And I was just told that that can't be true, that that's utter nonsense. And I said, but look at the ideas of gentrification. Now, they disagreed with me with gentrification meant. They said it just means people of a different culture coming in, driving up housing prices, and kicking out all the ethnic people. But I think it also means more than that to a lot of people. It's the idea of not just driving people out through price, but also driving people out through culture. And so you come into a community, like you go into Cuban America, and all of a sudden people start moving in that aren't Cubans, and they're bringing their culture. And so now what used to be a Cuban sandwich shop is now a Chinese restaurant. And sometimes that aggravates people of the original ethnicity. Spike Lee, for example, I showed evidence that said he was upset that white people moved into Harlem and started complaining about street drumming. And they started bringing in different styles of restaurants to take out barbecue places. It wasn't just he was saying white people are driving up prices. He was also saying, we like our culture here. And you hear this in conversations all the time about, don't culturally appropriate and things like that. Now, I don't think this is a controversial point. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying it's just true. And the funny thing is, we could see that. Like, we see that there are black nationalists, like the Nation of Islam. By the way, why am I still the only person in the country that's mentioning that during George Floyd's funeral, The pastor stood up and thanked the Nation of Islam for running security there. I have a video up about it. Not my words, the pastor's words. That's right, a black nationalist group was thanked. Every network ran this. No one spoke up. No one said, wow, that's really bad. No one said it. The same group ran by Louis Farrakhan that likened Jews to termites 2 weeks before the synagogue shooting. No one said a word. But anyways, it's just true. And there's this sort of rush to be anti-racist that all of a sudden you start kind of taking away agency from people. And I hate to even bring this term up, but there is a term that has been bandied around. It's called the noble savage myth. And what that is it has to do with the fact that there is this kind of idea that before Europeans came to the Americas, everything was utopia. It was a bunch of people living in total harmony. There was no crime, no death. I mean, people died, obviously, but everything was peaceful. They lived one with nature, and it was peaceful. And then Europeans came, and that's what started all the carnage. And that's just not true. That doesn't mean there aren't legitimate criticisms of the Europeans. Certainly there are. But for example, we know that in South America, there were human sacrifices that occurred regularly. We know that in North America, there was all sorts of tribal warfare that would go on with all sorts of heinous tortures and murders that would go on. Rapes, things of that nature. Now, again, that doesn't excuse the crimes of the Europeans. But history's complicated. There's no one race that's like, well, this race is good. They don't do anything wrong. And this race is evil. That sort of thinking leads to racism. And it leads to claims of ethnic superiority. And so the idea that it now is a controversial opinion. You could say, do you think white people want to live in white-only communities? Absolutely, they'd say. Absolutely, that's true. Absolutely, there are huge portions of whites that want that. Do you think there could be blacks that want to live in black-only communities? No, that would never happen. That's nonsense. That's a nonsense claim. You're treating black people as fetishes. You're treating them as this symbol. And again, Slavoj Žižek, who's a postmodernist on the left, who's a communist, he talks about this. That some of the worst racism he sees is the bigotry from sort of white liberals that are trying to speak up. And he gives this specific example. He says he's talking to Indian friends. And by the way, he, like me, uses the term Indian instead of Native American because actually Indians find the term Native American more offensive. So anyways, he's talking to Indian friends in the United States. And the Indian friend says this, do you know who aggravates us the most? It's people that treat us like we're sort of idols to be worshipped. And that, like these white liberal people that will say, yes, look at the Indians. Look at how they live, one with nature. In many ways, me with my big screen TV and living in my big house, you're living the right way. Your way of living is pure, and my way of living is a mistake. And the Indian says, my response to that is, great, let's trade places. Because he says, how dare you? My community's struggling mightily. And for you to idolize that and say that this is somehow great boon, that's racism. It's not. We want to be part of society. Stop treating us like we're these figurative, perfect people. It's not true. It's not. And it's insulting if you're a member of that community to be told that. And so I found it amazing that I was being told, the idea that there are Hispanic people that want Hispanic-only communities is nonsense. That's clearly not true. The only reason we have Hispanic-only communities is because evil white people or the government. That's the only reason. That's not true. It's not true at all. So I thought that was weird. And then the other part real quick I'll talk about in the debate that it just seemed like there's this, I think that oftentimes people don't understand how hyperbolic they're being when they start adapting some of these positions. Like, so the position would be, we're talking about removing Confederate statues. Here's my stance on it. I'm not even going to sit here and give the old, oh, but it's an important landmark of history. I don't even care about that, particularly with the Confederacy. I think there's a credible argument. I know people that respect the Confederacy, and it's not about racism, it's not about slavery, it's about they identify as someone who came from the South, and many of them feel that the North, even despite the war, that the North destroyed huge swaths of civilian property and land in the South and never repaired it. And so there is this pride idea of being Southern. And most of the people who had their property or their lives taken in the South weren't slave owners. So even though I don't relate to it, I could see theoretically being like, look, the Confederate flag doesn't mean slavery or racism to me. However, it was an insurrection against the United States, fighting against the country we now all live in. So I also see the argument, and it did have slaves. So I see the argument that we don't want these statues. It's not my battle. It's not something I feel super strongly about. So if they would vote to remove statues of Confederate generals, and that was the topic, that's very important for the Confederate, right? If they would vote, sure. But that's not what happened, is it? That's not reality. That's not what's happening. I'm opposed to using mob rule to remove the statues. I vehemently oppose that. I think everyone who does so should be arrested to the fullest extent of the law. Period. And I think that quite literally what happens then is that once you say, okay, it's okay to tear down the Confederate statue because blah, 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 and they own slaves, well then what's to stop you from tearing down George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, which happened. Of course, everyone in the debate said, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about that. We just want to talk about the Confederate statues. Okay, of course you don't want to talk about that. But still, their justification was this. Well, it's so heinous, the institution of slavery and the Confederacy was so heinous, that even without the democratic process, they need to be removed. So there's no problem with mobs removing them. But the problem with that is, then it's up to the subjective beliefs of the person who's offended or the group of people that are offended. For example, maybe I belong to a bunch of women's rights advocacy groups and people that are against abuse of women, and I think that Bill Clinton was credibly accused of sex offenses. Do I get to go remove Bill Clinton statues? Do I get to light the Congressional Library of Bill Clinton on fire? Of course not. There are proper procedures to go through with that. That's how a civilized society works. You don't just get to say, I'm offended, therefore I'm allowed to destroy property or harm people. And once you say, well, it's okay in certain circumstances, I assure you that every single person who wants to destroy something will say, well, this is that circumstance. My outrage is justified at this. And by the way, in the future, the same things will be done. Who knows what they'll say in the future when they look back at how primitive we were. Oh, those primitive beasts used computers? Didn't they know that computers would eventually become artificial intelligence and pseudo-life forms? They used electronics as slaves? How dare them? Remove that statue of Martin Luther King. He used telephones. It's nonsense, right? And I'm certainly against removing any statues of our forefathers, the American flag, icon like that. I'm against all of that. Now, here's the point I want to get to. When I try to say, can't you see how this will be used? They said to me, do you think there are things that are so heinous that it justifies people rising up to remove it without a democratic vote? And I said, sure, slavery. Other things, right? Genocide. For example, in World War II, Franklin Roosevelt interned Japanese Americans, put them in camps. And then many of them had their rightful land sold out from under them while they were in these camps. Now, there was no reason to do this other than, well, they could be spies for Japan. Okay? That was the only reason. If people rose up and tore down the gates of those camps and freed those people without a democratic vote, I would have been totally for it. They're totally morally justified to do so. And so they said, aha, so there, see? You admit there are times when you could take matters into your own hands and a democratic vote isn't necessary. And I said, yeah, but that's because the rights outlined in our country in the Bill of Rights were directly being violated in the most obvious and severe way possible. And so that justified people taking action. A statue being up is not that. And they said that I was wrong. They said it's like slavery. And so I just wanted to make the point. If you think a statue of Robert E. Lee is the same as owning a human being as a slave, you're insane. You're insane. It's not the same thing. Yes, you were justified to rise up to fight the institution of slavery. No, you were not justified to use violence to remove a statue that, in your mind, supports slavery. You're not. It's just... So now, briefly, I got like 15 minutes till end. So, I was going to talk about COVID tonight because I had another debate about COVID. But I did that in my roadside ramble. So I want to talk about this story. I'll be honest, I was busy all day, so I didn't really see this. But apparently Trump retweeted a white supremacist message. You guys see this? This is going all over Twitter. And so I don't have the video pulled up or anything, but what it was, I don't know, it was like, it looked like elderly people in a community that were arguing back and forth, and a bunch of people being morons to each other, some yelling at the pro-Trump people, some yelling at the anti-Trump or the, whatever. And right at the beginning of the video, I heard it the first time I listened to it, someone says, white power, white power. And Trump retweeted it. So therefore, Trump's a white supremacist. Kaka on Periscope, why do I care about a statue? I don't care at all about those. I care about the statues of the Founding Fathers because I understand the symbolism, not only that they represent, but the symbolism of tearing down statues. And I know what that's about. It's about erasing history. For example, it would be the same as me saying this. Why would you care if I tear down the statue of Martin Luther King? Who would care? Well, it's because that's symbolizing something. Right? Why would we care if we burn the gay pride flag? Because the people that are pulling down these statues want to end the United States. They want to end the institutions. And that's why it matters. So the statue itself, to me, it's like the flag. The statue of George Washington is like the flag. It's a symbol of our country, which is a country that I think is the greatest country in the history of the world. And I don't like seeing that symbol destroyed by people that want to destroy the country itself. But do I care about the Confederate statues particularly? No. What I care about is the fact that they're being destroyed by mob rule. That's what I care about. Like, for example, I might not care about my neighbor's Chevy Impala. I don't really care. What's it matter? I would care if vandals come and smash it and burn it on fire. Now I care. So anyways, back to this video about Trump. Yeah, agreed, Jeff. Jeff at large. Authoritarianism sucks no matter who's at the end of the political structure. So, Freebird thought he yelled solar power. Now he said white power. So then Trump's a white supremacist, right? Nah, I don't think so. Let me explain to you, just like with Charlottesville, what's going on here, in my opinion. Trump sees something. I mean, the guy, I don't know if he ever sleeps, but he's just listening to stuff and he's, oh, people are retweeting this, bam, I'm going to retweet it. And to him it looked like, look how horrible these anti-American people are. And people were standing up to it. I don't know that he even heard specifically what they were saying. Yes, destroying the Emmett Till Memorial was bad. I don't know specifically that case, I gotta be honest, but I'll take your word that it was destroyed. Yep, that's bad. Okay. Yes. Again, proving my point. Real quick, so Kaka says, so if I'm against destroying statues of the Confederacy, I must have been against destroying a statue like the Emmett Till statue. Yes. Of course. Right. Exactly. If you're okay with destroying some statues and not others, you might want to ask yourself why that is. You should either be against not destroying any of the statues or for destroying them all. At least those are consistent positions. But saying, well, I only want George Washington's statue destroyed, but not Martin Luther King's. Why would that be? Right? Anyways, that's what I think happened. Now, I'm going to say something that I'm sure will be accused of dog whistling to racism. But I truly think that this is worth pointing out. What is the context of the person yelling white power? Here would be my guess. That person knows that is a term that is traditionally used to dog whistles, that's traditionally said by racist. And so he's doing it to troll or trigger these people. Now, I don't know, but it's certainly a big possibility. Right, Carvo, I'm thinking he said it as tongue-in-cheek. But I don't know. He could be a racist. He could be, that's true. Again, that doesn't prove that someone retweeting it's racist, though. But, okay. Let's, for the sake of argument, saying that that is the criteria. That the president, he didn't say, I'm endorsing white power. He didn't say that, right? He just retweeted. In other words, he used his platform to play video of someone that said a racist message. Let's assume that's the case, okay? And therefore, that proves that he's a racist. That's the argument being made in the left. Okay, so let's run this thought experiment. If that's true, right, what do we say about every major network in this country that ran the George Floyd funeral where the Nation of Islam, you know, black power, black nationalists, were running security and praised? So I have to listen to someone, for example, from CNN say, oh, Trump retweeted something that said white power, therefore Trump's a racist. Meanwhile, that very network showed the funeral of George Floyd with the praising of the Nation of Islam, a group that doesn't just believe in black power, which arguably the phrase, I know the connotation of white power. I get it. I know that that's usually racist. But for some reason, black power isn't considered racist. That's considered holistic. But even taking that, it's not just that the Nation of Islam says black power. Fine, you might even be, if you want to have a double standard, say it's okay to say black power. Not white power, but it's okay to say black power. Well, the Nation of Islam goes further than that. They're black nationalists. They want a country solely for black people. Every network in this country ran that. They ran it. Not one of them stepped up and said, whoa, 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 whoa. We're praising the Nation of Islam here? Louis Farrakhan likening Jews to termites? We're praising that? They didn't come on. Anderson Cooper didn't come on and say, we're so sorry that we do not praise the Nation of Islam. We didn't know that was going to be said. We didn't. And they re-aired, by the way. They re-aired that segment. Not necessarily the segment where that preacher praised them, but they re-aired the funeral over and over and over and bits of it. When they heard it. Or is their defense going to be, well, we didn't hear it. We didn't know. Isn't that what Trump's saying? You said that doesn't matter if that's what Trump says. But it's another course du jour, right? Oh, yep, Trump's racist. Got it. Russia's back in the news. I'm not even covering that Russia story today. Why? You really believe this one after the amount that they lied to us? Oh, this time, though, their Russia story's real. Not even worth my spit today. Nope. Done. Meanwhile, the Ukraine's head prosecutor, appointed by the Ukrainian president that every single Democrat said was the man. This guy's awesome. He's fighting corruption. The prosecutor he appointed says that he has evidence that Joe and Hunter Biden committed horrible crimes, including extortion, stealing money from the Ukrainian people, etc., and not one station covers it in the United States. I watched the press conference. I saw it I listened to him. No one's covering it. It's the same thing here. Joe Biden says you can't be black if you don't vote for him. Trump retweets something, that proves he's a white supremacist. It's just stupid. Yeah, that's just it. It could be a guy baiting Trump supporters. It could be a guy who's baiting the anti-Trump people. I don't know. Is it stupid from a PR perspective for Trump to retweet this? Yes. But it doesn't prove he's a white supremacist. And of course, the people that always thought Trump was racist are going to say, see, this is proof that Trump is racist. Okay. So if that's the standard, then you also feel that all these major networks that broadcast a funeral praising a black nationalist movement is also racist, right? Or do you think that's somehow acceptable? And you certainly have never tweeted something that ended up being, or retweeted something that ended up having something in it that was arguably racist that you didn't hear. Because you're going to hold yourself to that standard, right? If you ever tweet something that you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that part, or I didn't know exactly what that meant. You convicted Trump in the court of public opinion, so I guess you'd hold yourself to the same standard? Of course not. We know that. All right, 4 minutes left. Does anyone have... yeah, right, we do have to laugh. Having a sense of humor is really important. So there was one white nationalist or black nationalist or something in here today. Yeah, I reject that. You're welcome to come listen to me. And actually, despite that being a disgusting ideology, he wasn't using racial epithets or anything like that or being rude. So even that, you're allowed to be on the channel, I guess, if you believe that. But I do vehemently disagree with that. Yeah, Carvo, and that's a discussion I had with someone today. The idea of, should we employ the tactics of the left against the left on the right? I'm still trying to do it in the have good faith thing, but I understand that there's a credible argument that my way of holding to my principles might not end up achieving the victory we need. For example, the idea of doxing or trying to cancel people by going after their employers, it probably won't end until enough prominent people on the left have it done to them. Sadly. I'm sorry. Oh, Ford, you muted him? Thanks, buddy. Yeah, that's what I was checking. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I don't really want the white or black nationalist thing. I mean, hopefully he could listen and, but yeah, I assume he was white too. But he could have been black. I mean, that's the irony, right? So I know those of you that aren't on DLive didn't see the conversation, but, you know, it was someone saying that I was stupid for thinking that white and black people could live together and that we needed separate countries and blah, blah, blah. Now, the assumption that my mod, the real Ford Nation, makes is he was a white nationalist, but was he? Maybe he's a black nationalist. But that proves my point. They're each other's greatest allies. The white nationalists and the black nationalists completely agree with each other on 95%. They just hate each other. They think the other side's the problem, but they agree on the solution. We don't want to deal with those people. We want our own country. But Freebird, I don't even know that he was a black nationalist identifying as a white nationalist. He never said I'm a white nationalist. He just said, I believe white and black people can't live together. He could have been a black nationalist saying that. Oh no, people making fun of my curtains again. I believe in you. Who was it that used to make fun of my curtains? This is my work office. Yeah, and I hear you, Ford Nation. That's why I don't want that stuff, because I'm trying to keep a conversation that's accessible to everyone. So I don't want people to get my channel banned because some, racist comes in and says some things. But thank you for liking my curtains. This is my work office. I didn't pick the curtains. Oh, you actually believe it? Well, thank you. Who was it? Someone used to come to my YouTube channel and constantly make fun of my curtains. Said they look like a raisin bagel. So, yeah. So, just to end the show here, I'll go like another couple minutes. It's going great. So, if I could just real quick suggest, if you look up Normal America or Normal America with Rob Noor on all platforms, you could probably find me. The only exception is Twitter. I think I'm just at Noor Robert right now. But thanks, Jojo. But yeah, I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe to me on multiple platforms, because like YouTube, I have more subscribers than anywhere else, but you never know when they're going to censor me. And I think if you watch my show, even today, I could talk about sensitive topics, and I don't think I'm doing so in a bigoted manner. I don't think I'm doing so in a harmful manner. I'm not advocating violence. I'm vehemently against it. I'm not a racist. I'm just talking about issues that I think it's worth talking about. So, but still, that doesn't mean that YouTube won't suspend me. But if you could follow me, like DLive's a great place to follow me. If you want to donate money, DLive's a great place to do it because 100% of it goes to me. On Twitch, I'm going to learn how to get the bits or whatever here soon. But if you follow me on Twitch, Twitch is great for having sort of panel discussions. And so once I get my new computer, I'm going to start really pushing my Discord. And all of you, if you want to join in, we could have like a panel of 8 people every night. Politically in the closet. I feel you, man. I think there's a lot of people A lot of people, there's a lot of reasons to be politically in the closet. You could just legitimately say, I agree with some things on the left and some things on the right. You could, like, I know tons of people that are like, I'm just disgusted with politics. I'm just disgusted. I don't want to hear about it anymore. It's everywhere. Or there are people that think both sides suck, so why take a side? All of those are legitimate reasons, you know? So I totally get it. And that's one of the reasons I'm willing to talk to people from any side. It's me, bro, Craig. What's up, Craig? Oh, I gotta fix that. Yes. Yeah, my D Live's a little different now, so I'll fix that. Thank you, Rational. Is everyone staying hydrated? Yes, I'm staying hydrated. Thank you very much for asking. So yeah, if you could follow me on all those platforms, that'd be great. I'll also make another appeal. If you could donate me monies, I would really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know, I just found out for the first time. Again, we're going through a really tough period in our country with COVID. With, you know, kind of the things we see with riots or, you know, protests and things like that are going on. So it's a weird position for me because that's happening at the national level. But for me personally, it is the best time I've ever had in my life. I just found out I'm going to be a dad for the first time a couple weeks ago. It is the most amazing feeling. I'm just on cloud nine all the time. I still do this show because I think it's important, and what you get is the authentic me. But I assure you, when I'm not on here ranting and raving about these political things, I am just ear to ear smile. I'm having a great time. So I really appreciate, I'm really having a good time. But part of that is now I'm going to have all these expenses, and, you know, I've chosen to kind of be in the home health. I have a master's degree. This is the first time in my life I've made over $15 an hour. I make like $15.50 an hour. I live paycheck to paycheck. I chose to kind of stay in the healthcare field and not go to make a bunch of money. I spent probably $7,000 running for Congress, which I knew I basically had no chance to win in 2019. So I spent a ton of money on kind of doing this political stuff, and I don't really make that much money. And my wife was incredibly supportive the whole time. But now that we have a baby coming, it's really hard for me it's unfair for the baby and for my wife to say, well, I got to keep putting money into this channel and things like that. So I apologize that I'm making a push to ask for money more often now. But it really, you know, it is something that could really help me, and it's going right into the show. And I'm getting a new computer so I could do more things like debates and things like that. So anyone who could donate to me, I really appreciate it. You could donate on Super Chats or on D Live. You can give lemons and things like that. I'll also put up my PayPal and Patreon if you want. But this is my personal email, which anyone could email me. And if you want to email me and then send something to me in the mail, if you prefer to not go through any of those platforms, I'm totally fine with that. I do have a master's degree. Is that what I said? I have a master degree in speech communication. So, but yeah, thank you all so much for that. If you want to support me in other ways, share like some of my smaller videos that I do. I think that'd be, thank you for the congratulations, by the way. I know, Casey, I should build my own computer, but I'm such a meathead, I don't know how, so I ordered a custom build laptop, and everyone told me I was dumb for getting a laptop, too, but understand, because I do home healthcare, I do these block shifts, like, I'm streaming tonight after I clocked out at my work office, and so I need a computer I could take with me, or else I'll only be able to stream on, like, Thursday nights, and that won't be good, so thank you, Jeff, I'm glad you liked the channel. To the gulag with me, says Ford Nation. Maybe someday. I'm not going to stop speaking up. I'm really not. So, there's a chance this week, then just brief programming note, you could usually find me here at 10:30 Eastern Time PM, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then I have my radio channel on Saturday, and then just in between doing random stuff. Oops, wait. Sorry, I did that wrong. But there is a chance that my live stream could be a little different one of these days, because I could be doing a mutual live stream with some people that are on the left, just kind of having discussions. So I hope you people like that. Just getting these links out there. PayPal and Patreon. And I know someone keeps telling me to get Subscribestar. I promise I'm going to do that. If I could say one thing about me, I think I might not be the highest quality person, but I think I put out a lot of quantity. There's hours and hours I do every week on this channel, and then I have a life, and I have my job on top of it, so there's little things like, oh yeah, I promised people I'd get on Subscribestar. I keep forgetting about that. You want to know where my master degree is? I have this crazy story about a house that I sold that I never got paid for, that I was supposed to be able to get back in and get a bunch of my possessions, like my degrees, a bunch of wedding stuff. And it's still in that house and I'm not allowed to get it. So, yeah, that's where my master's degree is. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. You guys are the best. Consider donating to me. Consider liking and subscribing and sharing with other people. My channel is going to grow, I think, especially once I get this new computer and I can start having debate panels and bringing people on. I think I'll probably try to limit that to panels of 3 and myself, so 4 people total. Because I think once you start to get more than that, it'll be more than I could manage. With that type of thing. But I'll push my Discord channel, and when I do a show like that, it'll be at least once a week. Anyone who wants, first come, first serve, you could jump in, talk, and we'll have topics picked out, and you can discuss what you want. So I think that the channel will grow. We'll welcome people of different persuasions on, and it should be a really good time. I appreciate so much each and every one of you that listen to me. I'm incredibly honored. If you're on the left, thank you for listening to me. If you're on the right, thank you. If you're anywhere in between, thank you. Even if you're a white nationalist and you're listening to me, thank you for at least listening. I disagree strongly. I think it's a despicable and terrible ideology, not just for a moral sense, which I think it's immoral, but also beyond that. I think practically it's a bad decision. And to separate the country like that would be horrible for the country. I really do think that would be the case. We saw that with the Confederacy. So I think that would be a disaster. But you're welcome to come here and listen. I'd appreciate if you don't say things like that in the chat because I don't want to get banned. But my feeling is, if you are unwilling to allow extremists to hear you, how can we ever expect them to not be extremists? So, is that the right Discord link now? Thank you, Rational. I appreciate it. Yeah, and we're going to try to start a community over there, so thank you. A nationalist is fine. I'm a nationalist. Here's the difference. I've had people say this. Well, I'm a patriot. I believe in patriotism, but not nationalism. I disagree. Here's the difference. Here's the analogy I would say is the difference. A patriot, let's like it like you're a family. So let's say you're a father and you're married and you have kids. A patriot would be the equivalent of a father saying, I think my family's the best. A nationalist would be someone saying, I think my family's the best, and the decisions I make will be for the good of my family first and foremost. What good is being a parent if you say, I think my kids come first, or I think my kids are the best, but I'm not going to live in a way that benefits my kids first. Instead of getting my kids school clothes, I'll get all kids school clothes, and then my kids will suffer. No, as a parent, your responsibility is to take care of your family. That's what a nationalist is to me. Being a patriot just means, yay, I love this country. Being a nationalist, especially in leadership, means, and I will fight for this country first. That doesn't mean you encourage wars against other countries, or you can't be empathetic or try to help out other countries, but your number one job as a leader and representative of this country is to represent the people of this country. Not giving money to other countries, not worrying about the poor in other countries. Again, you don't actively seek to exploit other countries. That's immoral. But your concern, first and foremost, is through a moral framework, a do no harm to others framework, to be focusing and advocating for the people that you represent first. So, Medieval Mike, you saw me on Tiberius' stream. Yeah, Tiberius, I think, told me he does stream Sunday at 8. So I'm going to try to join him on his stream, at least, every once in a while. I like Tiberius a lot. Tiberius is far more reasonable than me, far more, I think, centrist than me on some of these issues, but a great guy. And I feel bad because with such loudmouths like me that were on the panel as well on that debate, it was hard for him to get a word in edgewise. But I know when he did talk, he had some great things to say, and so I'd really like to get to know him better and be on there. Are internationalism synonymous with globalists? Not necessarily, oftentimes the case, but like an internationalist could be someone that just says, I think that we should not have nations govern for their own interests. They should govern for I don't care about countries. A globalist, I think, is more nefarious. A globalist is someone that's not thinking, I don't want to advocate for the country because of altruistic reasons, saying I want to help all the people of the world. They're saying we want to control all the people of the world. Oh, okay, and Republican Nation. Yeah, he was on the channel as well, or on that debate as well. So, yeah, I'd love to work with him some more, too. I thought he had some interesting things to say. So, okay, anyways, I got to get rolling. Thank you so much for anyone who donated. Thank you. Oh, I'll go to DLive. I'll give out the lemons. Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. So, yeah, if you're on DLive also, I could give out lemons to super big time winners. We'll see. See, it's my crappy computer. It takes forever to load. Anytime I try to bring up another website, it's just, ugh. Oh, I really hope this new computer works out. I really, really do. All right, distributing the awards. I don't have a lot to distribute today, but that's okay. So, you did it, Jeff. I know, it took me forever to figure out how to get those things to work. Right, I agree, Medieval Mike. Absolutely agree. Right, so that's why I don't have a problem. I in fact, call myself a nationalist. I really am. Again, I understand that people try to co-opt that term and say, oh, well, that means white nationalist. But if that's the case, if saying nationalist is likened to white nationalist, then isn't saying socialism equivocated to National Socialism? You know, Nazis. That's what they called themselves, the National Socialism Party. So if I say nationalist and the left says, aha, that's a dog whistle for white nationalists. Well, okay, if you say socialist, I say that's a dog whistle to National Socialist. Same thing, right? Or how about we just leave the term stand for what it means? Oh no, people are out of lemons. I got plenty of lemons. Who wins? Freebird, Phil, Baby Doll, and Trust is Earned. Congratulations. So Freebird's the big winner with 7 lemons. I believe that's what? 0.7 cents? You did it, man. You got it. Or maybe it is 7 cents. But congratulations. Oh, no, people are donating. Thank you. You guys are the best. You really are. I mean, it is really incredible. And I'll make this plea if you're watching. I know we probably have at least a couple people today that are watching that are on the left. I truly mean this. If you're on the right or the left, you should try to support independent content creators. There's one out there that's you're going to like. It might not be me. Like, even if you're on the right, you might just be like, stylistically, I just don't like Rob. You know, or I think that, you know, I like this other person better. That's great. Support them then. But even on the left, you might say, I hate this right-winger. What's he talking about? There are people for you, independent content creators on the left. There really are. And I think that it's important. One of the things we could do in this country is stop allowing the people that are controlling the narrative in the mainstream media and places like that, stop allowing them to have all the power. And when you're supporting independent creators, regardless if they're on the right or left, even if I disagree with the left-wing creator or right-wing creator that you're supporting, at least it's going to someone who's more likely to actually be authentic. Because it's almost impossible to see members of the mainstream media at this point that are authentic. They're all a joke. They're all propagandists. So that's my pitch to support independent creators. So thank you, everyone who says good job. If you think I did a bad job, that's okay. Thank you, too. So we'll talk to you all tomorrow. I might be doing some videos as the day goes on, so check that out. So thank you so much, everyone. As always, have a good one.